Twins Fest is over, but the Twins are still out and about in the media, yapping it up and filling it up, and that's good because they're not making any moves. But before we hear from them, we all have to get locked on Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Locked On Twins, your daily go-to destination for the top Minnesota Twins insight, discourse, and analysis. Personally, it's my favorite show of the Locked On Podcast Network, which, by the way, brings you your team every day. I'm co-host Dave Brown, an MLB writer, easy for me to say, BBWA member, and Baseball Hall of Fame voter. Please follow me on Twitter at AnswerDaveBrown if you like. You can also find me on Blue Sky at AnswerDave. Across the cosmos and Great Plains is Brandon Warren, a one-time Twins beat writer who has watched the club for work and for leisure for about 3 decades. You can talk smack at Brandon Warren, Brandon_Warren on Twitter, and simply by yodeling Warren on Blue Sky. Here's what's coming up on this podcast. The Twins might not be acquiring available players in trades or free agency because the Pohlads have hidden the mattress. They keep the money in. But they are making Twins available for fans and media to consume content. We just had Twins Fest and Twins Fest Live and Twins Fest Afterlife. And we're getting opportunities to hear from people like new hitting coach Matt Borgschulte, who guested on Inside Twins on Wednesday. Top prospect Walker Jenkins has been on MLB Network and has spoken to reporters about his 2024 season and where he expects to finish 2025. Royce Lewis did a fun interview on MLB Network Radio. Royce is usually fun, but he's also informed the world about how he's preparing for 2025 so it doesn't turn out like 2024. So before we get into details about all that stuff, we asked Brandon now to tell us about one of our sponsors for today's show.
Well, good evening, sports fans. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started.
Wednesday was fun because we got to hear in depth from
Borgschulte.
there it is.
Borgschulte.
Greg Masterson refers to Matt Borgschulte as Borgschulte. It's what I have to call him myself, but it's just kind of a funny. That's a drop in. I'm pretending we're like wacky radio DJs now, Brandon. So, it's I'll work on the sound quality there, but he did like a 30-minute interview on Inside Twins today, and he seems like they were throwing terms around like old school teacher. I did sort of like how he communicated or indicated that he communicates with the guys. It's not, you can have a philosophy of, mining and minding the data, but really it's about being able to communicate and get guys out of slumps, get guys out of their own heads, be a little psychologist on the spot. It's, you need to know all that stuff, but as far as talking to the players, it seems like, I don't know if the previous guys had trouble talking to the players or they just needed to hear from somebody new, but my first impression of Matt Borgschulte is positive based on this interview.
So one of the most dogged things that I ever did when I was doing the in-person reporting was I had asked for time with Joe Vavra, who was the hitting coach at the time. I think it was the end of 2011. And basically I got, 20 minutes with him, which is an eternity to have with a hitting coach. And I just said to him, like, I don't even mean this as a joke. What % of your job do you consider yourself being a psychiatrist? And he said, yeah, no, that's a really good way to put it. And basically he has to balance where hitters are, whether they're cruising and maybe are wanting to be a little more hands off with their swing, just, let me do my thing. Or if it's a young guy who's really trying to find that thing to unlock power or making contact or whatever, it really comes down to instruction and how you handle personalities. And obviously with this organization, they're going to prioritize how these guys handle the data, at the very least, how they use it as input for the output that they create for hitters. And I think the fact that Borgschulte was in the organization before for like 4 years or 3 years as a minor league hitting instructor and made his way back. He's going to be working with some of the hitters that he worked with down there. I know that Gino mentioned Trevor Larnach and Jose Miranda, and a few others. It just, to me, the whole like full circle thing of it is kind of interesting and something I'll be keeping an eye on, because the guys that he worked with are the ones that they're kind of relying on to find that next level, to support Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa, or if it's like last year, when those guys are down, pick things up and kind of leave, pick up where those guys leave off and hopefully carry this team better than they did down the stretch last year. So when I think of Borgschulte as a, like a prodigal son almost, I think it's kind of interesting that the Twins prioritized him and he prioritized returning to the Twins, so much so that he left an Orioles organization that is kind of like the envy of everyone as far as young offensive talent. And so I don't know if there's something to be made of that, whether it was things not going well or Baltimore going another direction or some combination of that. But I think that the Twins did a nice job going out and getting somebody who they obviously were already very familiar with and held in pretty high regard.
Yeah, it's always interesting when people leave organizations. Like, why did it happen? I sense that it's certainly there's so many young and talented players in the Orioles, and even some of the older guys that came along and hit well. It didn't seem to me like scoring runs was necessarily something that they were lacking. I don't know if they just needed a change of scenery kind of a thing, or, is anybody going to say that, Gunnar Henderson is underachieving? Before he got hurt, Jordan Westberg certainly wasn't underachieving, and Colton Cowser seems to be pretty good. And Cedric Mullins kind of slipped and had a good second half for them. And they had a few other players who were...
Adley had a tough year, I think.
Adley, yeah, I think I don't know if is that why they made a change, just because of Adley. I just look at the preponderance of evidence, and most of the guys in the Orioles were doing fine or better, or there was a definite improvement. Is it just because Adley struggled?
My sense was that Borgschulte opted to leave. Like, it wasn't that they forced him out or asked him to leave. It was just the Twins gave him, I don't know if it was a raise or a better opportunity. Obviously, he's not I don't know. Is it a lateral move? It's a lateral-ish move. And so it's hard to say that it's a better opportunity, but maybe it's a better fit for him. And the fact that he's been in the organization before, it makes more sense for him to say, this just feels more right to me. He's not going to a team he's never been with and saying, what, right, this just feels more right to me. There is some logic to if that's the case.
I do like how it works out, though, and you alluded to it already, talking about the players that he knows from the minor leagues and trying to get them right. And sometimes, hearing a new voice is something, but also hearing an old voice from the past is comforting in a way that it could possibly just kind of trigger, maybe some bad habits develop along the way, and maybe Borgschulte coming back will be a way to address that with the players who...
It's a new old voice. It's like hot ice from Rookie of the Year. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. My son loves watching that movie. I never liked Rookie of the Year, but because it's just too goofy. For a 10-year-old, but yeah, it is kind of like hot ice. That's a good way to put it. So... why don't we take our first break? How many breaks we got? We got one or two?
Just the one where we're gonna turn externally. So after this one, we can plow right through and talk about Walker Jenkins and Royce Lewis and all that fun stuff. Not to steal your thunder, not that I ever would do that.
We'll do some more. I got a couple more Borgschulte points, but we're about 10 minutes in, so this seems like a good time to just take a break.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, and endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss if you're that kind of person, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake right there. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com and get started. Again, bet just $5, and if that bet hits, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. Kind of hard to believe it's Super Bowl 59 already, isn't it?
Yeah, I know I'm like 10 years older than you, so it's really hard to believe. It's also really impossible to keep up with the Latin, Greek, or Sanskrit letters, whatever it is.
What's the first Super Bowl you remember? I'm not trying to hijack the show here, but for me, it's Cowboys beating it's either Cowboys beating the Steelers, or I definitely remember hanging on like every moment of 49ers over the Chargers.
It's funny that you mentioned the Cowboys and the Steelers. It's not that Super Bowl. That's not 95 or whatever that was. 30? Super Bowl 30. It's Super Bowl 13. And I don't remember that much about it, but it was the Cowboys and the Steelers. It was the second time they met. And I remember that my mom had placed a bet. And in those days, that was not legal. And she, I think she won a backdoor cover. Wow. It was like a last second. It was 35-31, and it was like a last second touchdown that, and the Steelers won by 4, and that made her, I believe, a last second touchdown by the Cowboys, and that made her a winner. So that's what I remember about it, gambling. So,
well. Perfect. That's actually a really perfect segue from our ad. So good. Yeah, it was real good.
Okay. Well, this is still Locked On Twins, and we're talking. We're talking about Matt Borgschulte returning to the Twins organization as hitting coach. There are a couple things in there that I liked. I actually got to ask a question. It wasn't, the Twins need to like publicize these a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I was watching this one, and there were like 30 people watch 30. That's like one of our shows.
Yeah,
the
right.
Twins should have hundreds of people, at least thousands, millions. And I got word that this was happening like 45 minutes before it dropped. So, it's not like it's Rocco or Valvi or somebody like that, but still a very interesting. I'm glad they had him on. I thought it was a good, informative show. He mentioned that the Twins, he did throw some red meat to some people. Borgschulte did. They're going to work on situational hitting. Hopefully, that situation includes swinging at strike 3, so it's not not taking strike 3. I agreed. There's like one comment on the YouTube page, and somebody's like, "Hey, can we get the guys to not take strike 3 all the time?" Now, because my question was about Edouard Julien, what will make him rule again, and Borgschulte, basically said he's got a real solid foundation, a nice inside-out swing to left center field, blah, blah, blah. Some of it was platitudes and whatever, but he seemed confident that whatever was ailing Edouard, he could fix coming into this season. And that's another guy, I have a feeling, especially if there's like no more trades or free agents, he's going to be important. It's not only important for Edouard to get his career on the move, but the Twins could use that somebody in the lineup like him.
I have the data handy. Where do you think the Twins were in looking strikeouts this year? Because I was shocked.
Well, third worst.
16th. Tied for 16th. 329 with the Braves and the Rangers. So, short answer, basically right in the middle. And so I think the perception is more along the lines of percentage based, because Seattle led MLB with 391.
Yeah.
Seattle also struck out way more than everybody else. So I think it's more along the lines of, yeah, the Twins didn't strike out as much as Seattle, and that's why their raw number isn't as high, but they had enough looking strikeouts relative to total strikeouts where you felt as though it was maybe a little over the top. Some of them were in bigger spots. You definitely saw almost like Edouard Julien was just crashing out with 2 strikes and just quiet quitting. And I think that the perception was driven by that. They were about league average when it comes to that. But I think relative to the fact that, they weren't a crazy high strikeout team, it probably just felt a little bit more prominent. And that's why, it kind of sticks in your craw a little bit more than the raw numbers would indicate.
And it's my recollection anyway, that it was kind of you would have like innings, like 7th, 8th inning, where they would work the count and get back in the game. Of course, I don't know where they finished in terms of runs at the end of the game, but that was a big thing for a while, that they were really good at scoring late and they were able to work counts and do that. But I think, also in the Edouard Julien vein, they took it a step further and left a lot of meat on the bone by working the count too much and letting the pitcher work them at the end of it.
The Twins were second in MLB in runs scored from the 7th to 9th innings with 256. That is a plus 58 differential, which also was second in MLB. Diamondbacks are the only team with more runs after the 7th inning, actually 7th to 9th, not extras. And the Dodgers plus 64 were the only team with a better differential. Now, that to me is still troubling in that the Twins scored against bullpens and they held other teams down and they were still mediocre. And that to me is just it just again was when it rains, it pours. Every time they did something that cost them in a game, it cost them the game itself. And,
right.
They just were not able to avoid the old Plaxico Burress shooting yourself in the foot, leg, or whatever appendage your mileage may vary.
The thick part of the thigh, wasn't it there?
I think that's what it was, yeah.
Yeah. Player shootings, there's too many to properly index in your mind. But so, yeah, on the one hand, it makes you frustrated about the season. On the other, it also could be an indication of, with the slight adjustment, with a little more aggressiveness in the right spot, this could turn into a really, really good offense, consistently so, and one that would make them the favorite in the division at least, and possibly a World Series contender again.
Right.
Not to be too whatever about it, but so Borgschulte thinks, that the problems are fixable. So that's good, if nothing else. Right. So that was fun. He another person that was kind of made available, Walker Jenkins. He did a little MLB Network thing and talked to some writers. And the big takeaway that I got, he's a couple things were not that what he said bothered me, but he's already been injured a couple times, and it's soft tissue stuff, and it just kind of reminded me of other Twins already. It's like, oh, he had a quad, and then he had a hamstring, and then I don't want to pigeonhole a guy or stereotype him already. I don't want that to happen again with this. So he's already working on ways to get through a season and be healthier. But aside from all that and all the allusions to other Twins getting hurt, he said he wanted to, and he did. He finished last year at Wichita, so right. He said he wanted to finish 2025 with the Twins in the majors. And he's only 19 or 20 or whatever he is. So that would be I haven't seen the ETAs for him are 2026, but that would be amazing. I certainly would not expect Walker Jenkins to be a starting player or a terribly important one for the 2025 team. But if he's up, that's a great sign, at least for pushing for the depth of the squad going forward. Yeah,
he's number 3 on Kylie McDaniel's list, number 3 on the newly released MLB pipeline list. And I don't know if you saw it, but did you catch who he reminds Kylie McDaniel of? Because it's kind of a fun name.
Remind me.
JD Drew.
Oh, that's right. I did see that.
Quite a nice ball player. I mean, I know he had interesting start to his career. In fact, he passed through St. Paul much like Jenkins probably will, because didn't Drew get drafted?
He held out.
He held out, and I did the whole thing where he went and played for the St. Paul Saints for a while, and I don't remember who he was teammates with and all that, but it was a fun kind of little
Wasn't
story.
it like Darryl Strawberry time?
I don't know if Kevin Millar was there, if Darryl Strawberry was there, if Jack Morris was there. I can't remember the exact era because for some reason I'm feeling like it was like 1996 or 7. But is that too far back? I'm remembering Stephen Drew more recently than JD Drew, which is true because he's the younger brother. But yeah, I want to say he was with some pretty important players on that Saints roster. And again, just a fun name to invoke if he were to debut this year. A couple things, as the number 3 prospect in baseball, and I saw someone else note this too, Roki Sasaki ahead of him is going to be off that list in short order, assuming his elbow holds up, which seems to be the new issue du jour that people are talking about. And then I think Dylan Cruz is ahead of him too. And those two will likely graduate well in advance of Jenkins. So Jenkins could very well be the number 1 prospect in baseball. And those are the kinds of guys that debut at 19, 20. You said 2026 as an ETA. Even that's, he's barely going to be of legal drinking age if that's what happens. And so it's interesting to see him regarded that way and regard himself that way. But also, too, the way this team is built, I mean, if you were ever going to force your way onto this team as a hitter, corner outfield probably wouldn't be a bad spot to start. Trevor Larnach was good, not great last year. Matt Wallner, a lot of people are really excited about Matt Wallner. I know in the fantasy baseball community, they're excited about the power and, combination of, especially if they're not in a strikeout league. And so, those two guys, though, are not infallible. And it's not like Max Kepler is coming through that door as someone who's been in the organization for 15 years and you kind of cede playing time to him. So I think it's a lofty goal, but I don't think it's impossible or even irresponsible to say. And I want a guy like that to be confident. It sure seems like he is. But again, yeah, those darn injuries, it's, I don't have enough data around the league to see if the Twins are more or less injury prone with their prospects. But I tell you what, kind of like strikeouts looking on offense, it feels like a higher level than most other teams.
This is what Jenkins said about that regarding himself. Being injured somewhat hindered the way I like to play, Jenkins said. I had to be able to manage my body, and I wasn't able to go what I felt was like full throttle all the time. So, he's certainly aware of not the apparent trend of injuries with the Twins, but he's already thinking about how to manage this and how to avoid it. And it's funny. They mentioned swimming. He's like a swimmer sometimes. And that's one thing that he does to help himself get into better shape overall for baseball. And I noticed in Royce Lewis's interview on MLB radio that he's playing a lot of pickleball to
he's an old soul, man. What cracked me up though? I have a friend of a friend who's an orthopedic surgeon and said that this spike in pickleball has been a windfall for a lot of those guys and gals because they are repairing a lot of Achilles tendons. So,
great.
Because here's the deal. People like me or like you, if we have been out of high school, 20 years for me, however many years for you, and we still feel like we can at least be somewhat athletic, our body may not agree. And especially if we have not maintained the upkeep necessary, we might still feel like we can, pivot and cut. And there is some quick twitch, soft tissue stuff at play here. And if yours has been dormant for a long time, that's problematic. Now, in the case of Lewis, you hear about athletes doing yoga and plyometrics and different kind of training as opposed to being muscle bound or, the really being like jacked. Like Giancarlo
Right.
Stanton is an obvious one that people point to as maybe he's too jacked up. So I don't know. Maybe moving the quick twitch and all those soft tissues the way that pickleball does. Maybe that's the ticket. I've heard of dumber things.
Royce, I wouldn't say blamed, but he indicated that working out with weights and getting too shredded didn't necessarily help him. He said he felt all powerful, but he's kind of needed to learn how to ease up on running sometimes and not necessarily go 1,000%, 1,000 miles an hour all the time. Pickleball, he said, it's kind of like ping pong, and we've seen ping pong tables in major league clubhouses for 20 years. That's not a new thing. So from that standpoint, the hand-eye coordination and all that, maybe there's some linkage as far as
I bet he's a nasty pickleball player. Like I bet he's very good.
I'm sure he is. But he also mentioned, he's like, he basically said this isn't going to happen again. I'm not going out and hitting a home run on opening day and then getting another hit and getting hurt and being out for a number of weeks. That's just not any way to do it. So he's playing a lot of different sports. He's running a lot more, maybe three or five times a week. He's kind of following the Mookie Betts diet of doing different things. Mookie's shooting hoops and catching passes and bowling, and he loves pickleball. And he's kind of, how does he do it? So I think that's as good of a head start as any for Lewis on this season.
And I heard, back in the day, I think Glenn Perkins, when he was still pitching, was more along the lines of like he had a year where he lifted weights and came back and just fell all out of sorts. And so he moved on to like swimming and yoga, and it kept him limber and flexible. And for, a pitcher, that's especially important. But, an infielder who may not have a stationary specific position, there's going to be a lot asked of him athletically, in addition to the fact that he's probably going to hit fairly high in the order, again, depending on health. But this is a pivotal season for a lot of guys, and I think he's at or near the top of that list. So I applaud the effort of doing something different. It can be hard. He's going to be, he is 25 and he's done things a certain way for a quarter of a century. And even though he's still a young man in terms of baseball years, doing something a certain way and then switching it this far into your life, it's got to be difficult. So again, hats off to him for being willing to try something different because, what was happening before didn't seem to be working.
I don't want to put it all on Royce because it isn't all on Royce. We're assuming some things about the Twins. If Buxton plays 100 games again, if Correa is healthy, assuming those things happen again, and you probably shouldn't, he's the most important player in the lineup after those two guys, and maybe more so than Buxton. Although Buxton being in the lineup and being on defense and that symmetry with Correa, those two guys are probably 1-2, but Buxton's right there. But Royce Lewis is right.
He's
there.
like the Chris Bosh to their LeBron and D Wade.
Right.
I think that's
he's when the Bulls added Rodman after having Scotty and Michael Jordan or something like that. I mean, the analogies are, whatever, but it's making that triangle and going from there. So it was funny though. One thing he mentioned, they asked him about some other things like, what's Carlos Correa like? And I found him communicating again with Carlos, how maybe they've been lobbing each other. He's like, Carlos Correa. Yeah. I looked up to him when I was young. So he's just mentioning again how old
Grandpa
is. Exactly. So
now, Grandpa, let's get you into bed. No, we had a fun joke with this a couple of years ago when it was like, does Sonny Gray secretly hate Carlos Correa? I think it was, or something like that. And then we were like really super reading into things. And the one that I came up with was Sonny Gray's nickname, it said on Baseball Reference, was Pickles. And then there was a video, like they were doing these funny little things of like, what is something you hate that everyone likes, that players will be walking in. And Correa goes, I hate pickles. And I was like, seeds of discontent again. Seeds of, it is like Sonny Gray's not coming back, and it's not because he hates Rocco. It's because Carlos Correa and him don't see eye to eye, and a lot of good fun in that. But it is kind of funny though to think of Correa and Lewis as communicating that way, like they're throwing a message in a bottle and letting it float over to the recipient or something.
Do you know
like that.
spy versus spy? Maybe it's a little bit like that, where they try and top
Exactly.
each other with
Yep.
some kind of absurd line. But anyway, that's probably going to do it for this episode. Is there anything else, Brandon? Am I forgetting anything, Brandon? I don't think so.
Obviously, again, check out FanDuel with the Super Bowl 59. Go on the app, $200 in bonus bets. Make sure you check that out. It's a great deal. Super Bowl coming up here. Going to be a lot of fun.
And we are going to come back with another show on Thursday, I would imagine, and we'll talk about more fun things. And we've got like Twins Hall of Fame talk again. Like Brandon and I have been talking, like who's the next guy for the Twins Hall of Fame? Maybe we'll do something like that. So
working on a couple guests too. Matt
Yes.
Cantorino and Mickey Gasper both said they would come on the show at Twins Fest Live. So knock on wood. I'd love to hear from both those guys.
Absolutely. Mickey, if you're out there, listen to Brandon. Call him back. Anyway, so for Brandon Warren, this is Dave Brown, wishing you all a very pleasant good evening and saying until next time on this isn't Twins Fest Live, but it's
Locked on Twins Fest Live.
Locked on Twins Fest Live Afterlife. We're going to Alexei Casilla
Tomorrow night.
Alexei.